Hello and welcome to the Irish Aesthete. Previously, I was out in the grounds of Huntington Castle in County Wexford talking to its owner, Alexander Durdin Robertson, about the history of the grounds and how his family came here to live at Huntington. But Alex, we've now moved into the entrance hall and I want you to tell me a bit about the history of the building.
Sure. So I suppose really the area was quite strategically important in the 17th century. And that's because there are two river valleys in the area. You have the River Slaney, about a mile down that way, and you have the smaller River Derry, a tributary of the Slaney, just in here in the village of Clonegall. And funnily enough, although it's quite a small river, the Derry was very important for oak, and Ondera in Irish is the oak, and that is the River of the Oak. And that became the main road from North Wicklow, coming down from even as far away as Dublin, down through South Wicklow to this part of Carlow, and on then down, following the Slaney to Wexford. So this was the main Dublin road, if you like. And it had all its oak. So it was of the interest of the Crown to make sure that trade could come through, because this area was actually quite lawless. This was the last of the sort of the High Council, the septs of some of the great Irish families and clans. Still held sway, especially in Wicklow and around the Blackstairs, the Kavanaghs. So they were quite keen on allowing the Esmonds, which was where we came in, to basically garrison the area. So the Esmonds took over what was an old Kavanagh fortress, which was a sort of 14th century, which came after the original abbey, which we saw in the gardens.
Yeah.
And so they would have, I suppose, recycled quite a lot of the actual stone and some of the larger timbers. And they built a tower house on the site, which was completed in 1625. And it was very much a military building.
It was very defensive in character.
Correct.
To withstand the potential for attack, which happened pretty soon afterwards.
Yeah, and exactly. And they were, I suppose, a military garrison who were trying to pacify the area of the Derry and the Slaney to allow trade up and down and to establish that rule of law and that sort of Pax Britannica. And then once that had occurred, the area actually became relatively peaceful and prosperous. And by about 1680, Lawrence Esmond then really started to redesign not only the house but also the gardens. And he, being a Catholic peer, had spent time in France, as we were mentioning, the gardens, and so he was very much looking at sort of that style of parterres and avenues and so forth.
Exactly.
But the remodelling of the house then started to expand. So this is the old tower wall here, which
With
is now inside.
little granite
window. Little granite window. And then you had these extensions being added. So then each sort of subsequent generation has, not every generation, but quite a lot of generations have added on to the house. So it's got a sort of split story, higgledy-piggledy fashion. So you say the original core part is a Jacobite with that extra extensions that have been added on right up until the sort of the 1860s, 1880s, even the little 1920s.
Conservatory.
Yeah, well actually it originated in 1860 with the balcony in 1920.
Okay.
So there's a lot of things going on.
Well, if we go upstairs to the foot of the staircase, we get a sense of that with the panelled hallway.
Exactly.
So let's just walk up there and have a
Sure.
look at it.
After you, Robert.
So Alexander, we're halfway up the staircase now. There's a rather interesting opening which you're just going to explain.
Yes, so this is actually, Robert, a coffin niche. So what I was talking about, the original castle walls are directly over your head. You'd better hope those timbers
Hold up for a little longer.
Are good and strong, because that's the original castle wall. And even though we're probably about 25 or so feet off the ground, you can see how thick those walls are.
Yeah.
And so they would have knocked through
the
wall when they're extending the castle subsequently. But this would have been within the original sweep of the original staircase of the tower. And this little niche is a coffin niche. So if you were taking a coffin or a large piece of furniture up or down the stairs, you've got the little bay to put one in, you tuck it in and lift it over the staircase.
And the staircase is quite early. I mean, there aren't many first half, mid 17th century staircases surviving in Ireland.
It's interesting you point this out, because these banisters here are these are some of the original sets. So I would date these between about 1625 to 1680
Yeah.
from the original period. This little bit here is an add-on.
Yeah, it's very curious.
Quite so add-on, and this was added on by a chap called Bishop Leslie,
Right.
and the Leslies rented the house for about 10 years in the 1750s, 1760s, and he suffered terribly, poor man, from gout, and you can just imagine the agony. And being a bishop, of course, his diet would have been incredibly rich, full of port and the best meats and wines, and so he would have his feet heavily bandaged, and he put this in to help him negotiate the
Totter around the
to
turn.
try and lift a bit of the weight off his feet. So poor man must have suffered for his high living. But there we are.
It's completely redundant now. We could take it out because none of us suffer from gout after all.
Of course not. Now we'll pop down and have a look at some of the.
We're going to look at some pictures. So as Alexander just said, in the next episode, we're going to be having a look at some of the family portraits and the stories behind them. Thank you so much for watching The Irish Aesthete, and I look forward to seeing you then. Goodbye.